Hello, my friends over at Face to Face Gaming. This is Travis Semulin Sours, and we're jumping into another traditional best of 3 AFR draft on MTG Arena. Do be sure to check out Face to Face Games for great deals on card games, all sorts of stuff. It's a great shop. I've been to the one in Montreal, got to do a draft with Alexander Hain. It was great. So, now that we are here and we've opened our first pack, what do we want to pick? I passed a Zalto yesterday on stream, and we did manage to 3-0. My concern here is I'm not actually sure if Zalto is better than a Chaos Channeler. Now, the thing Zalto's really good at is dealing damage. I like that about Zalto. Zalto plays really well with combat tricks. I also like that. I do like Portable Hull, and I like the Chaos Channeler a lot. The Purple Worm has gone down somewhat for me, as it's mostly just an arbitrarily large creature, and generally speaking, by the time you can cast it, if they really need to kill it, they can. The commons are somewhat lackluster, but Drop and Watch are okay. I'm going to take Zalto. I do think he goes best in red-green, although we could play him anywhere. Well, now, I don't often get to play red in this format much anymore. The kind of consensus amongst some of the top drafters is that black-red is the best deck that you can get into, which generally means it's overdrafted, and that I can get a better version of something like blue-black, which a lot of people don't like, or white-green, which a lot of people don't like, and put that together. But if I'm going to start with Zalto into a Magic Missile, I can kind of be like, yo, maybe we're just going to like stick red for a little bit and see where this takes us. If I felt that Minimus Containment was miles above Magic Missile, I would probably take it anywhere here. But I don't think that that's the case. The fact that this can go face and can occasionally get you a 2-for-1 is kind of a big deal. So we're going to start with this, and I'll be sad if we don't play red. And it's important to remember at this stage in a draft, we're not red. We'd like to be, but we're not 100% on red yet. So like, this is a pack where I think someone could argue to take the Faraday's Fireball instead of another card here, just so that we could keep red. And I don't actually think that that's the case. I think that the Fireball is somewhat replaceable. You've got Spiked Pit Trap, which is almost the same card. Don't tell anybody I said that. It's sneaky but true. Because I think the cards here are the Lightfoot Rogue and the Sepulchral Ghoul that we should be thinking about. There are some good green and blue cards here, but they're not particularly high picks. I think I'm going to go for the Ghoul, which is a little crazy. But if I'm playing black and pair it with the red, I'm going to be really happy to have this, because you can start turning Acts of Treason into real removal spells. Without pairing it with red, the Lightfoot Rogue is a little better. But I'm going to take a slight gamble here and take that Ghoul. I'd really like to see a solid red card here. And I do in the Valor Singer. It's not exactly busted, but there's not really anything busted here. I've been particularly unimpressed with Wish and Power of Persuasion. Wish kind of has the advantage of, like, if you need to go get a land for 3 mana, you can, but, like, no, thank you. Yeah, I'm not entirely... So, there's an argument to take the Basilisk, and if I knew I was green, I think I would take the Basilisk. I'm going to do what I said I didn't want to and take the Valor Singer, but it's not because we have these red cards, it's because I think it may actually be the best card in the pack. It's just kind of a weak pack. Well, now. How about that, Kellyan? I usually say that drafts start around pick 5, and that's where there's something in the pack, and you're like, wait a minute, why is this here? The Aberrant Mind Sorcerer is actually pretty good. Rust Monster is pretty nice in black-red, and so is Kellyan. So I think this may be our indication that we could start doing this. Oh, they're painting a Displacer Beast. That's kind of cool. So, okay, maybe I get a chance to play black-red. That makes me happier I took the Ghoul. Pack leaves a tiny bit to be desired. I do like the Rust Monster if you can get equipment for it or consistently generate treasures to feed to it. If you cannot, it's kind of lackluster. The Shambling Ghast is okay. It'll usually trade for some 2-drops. It'll get you a treasure, which you can use for something. Earth Cold Elemental is fine, but I've already got a big thing. The card I like the most here is actually the Cursed Idol. But we're not in green. I'm going to speculate on the Rust Monster. This looks like we're supposed to be doing black-red. Black is obviously not open, right? Like, we're not seeing any good black cards. But I think black-red is, or we wouldn't have seen that Kalian that late. And it's possible that I'm wrong, because we've seen some good blue stuff. We could shift into red-blue if we have to. Kind of want to take this Price of Loyalty and see if I can pick up another Sepulchral Ghoul or even a Deadly Dispute. I don't love Deadly Dispute, but if I can get into the sack deck, it can be quite nice. So Thieves' Tools is quite good in blue-black. I don't know how good it'll be for us. The Rust Monster is kind of speculative at the moment, and frankly so is the Price of Loyalty. This pack is kind of stinky-dinky, yo. I really don't like Barbarian class, but you know, it's a red card, let's hack it. If we get into heavy blue-red dice rolling, I could see that sort of doing something. Okay, there's a problem here in that the Portable Hole is way better in an individual card level than the Sepulchral Ghoul, but now it's time to decide, are we doing this? Because if we are, I want the Ghoul. And I think the Ghoul means we're doing this. So come on, Barbie, let's go party. Yeah. Windfall can be a little better in this style of deck than it usually is because we could feed the treasures to the Rust Monster or use them to put +1/+1 counters on things with Kalian. So I think I want the Windfall, and I think I'm ready to call this our pack 1. If I did abandon ship, it would be for red-blue. But it's worth noting that would like diminish the quality of some of the cards we have. I actually don't mind one combat trick with Zalto. I don't really want it to be that one. I might prefer a Feign Death. But we'll see if we can bump into it. That's a pick and a half, ain't it, yo? We got PWK versus the Reaper's Talisman. Reaper's Talisman is a card that I don't particularly like, but it is incredibly powerful. So I don't like it because I'm not a huge fan of playing aggressive decks. You know, this is I'm still going to take it. This is a fine time to mention a theory I got by reading a Twitter thread from Jorbs, who is a strategy gamer. And he said, if you have if you watched my videos 2 years ago, I would have said I'm a mid-range drafter. I don't draft aggro decks or control decks. I'm a mid-range drafter. And he made a pretty compelling argument that if you're putting yourself in a position where you have a particular playstyle in mind when you start to draft your deck, that you're just crippling yourself. And he's right. If the best deck that I could be drafting at a table is an aggressive combo deck, then that's exactly what I should be doing. Right? Because otherwise I would just be missing out on a fantastic deck by taking all the mid-range cards and having a bad mid-range deck. So here's our third sacrifice effect. It's a good one. It continues to make treasures. We've got things to do with the treasures. We can yoinks their dudes with Price of Loyalty and sacrifice them to the merchant and draw cards, or sacrifice them here. Like, this is actually coming together, and there's a Price of Loyalty here that we might spin. And at this point, I'm ready to play 2 Price of Loyalties. With another Sepulchral Ghoul, we could even consider going up to 3. The Morningstar is also pretty good for a deck like this, so is the Barbarian. We could probably play the Armory Veteran if we've got some equipment to go on it. And I hardly ever say no to an Evolving Wilds, but we're just legitimately drafting the Sacrifice deck, which doesn't come together that often for me, so it's kind of exciting when it does. Hoarding Ogre gives us some more treasures to spend on feeding our first Rust Monster or to turn into +1/+1 counters with Kalain. So I think I'm pretty happy with it here. I think I'd like that more than the second Rust Monster. Like, let's make sure we've got enough to feed the first one. And then if the second one wheels, we can be thrilled. The first one did, so the chances of this one wheeling are actually pretty good. Whereas a lot of decks want the Hoarding Ogres. Basically, red-white's the only deck that doesn't. Because black wants the treasure, green and blue want the ramp. Okay. So now it's time to kind of think about what does the deck need more than the other, right? So our removal suite is looking pretty good. I think what we need is 2-drops that can attack. So I think I am on the Lightfoot Rogue here. Like, to an extent, everything is a threat with the Talisman. Sometimes I won't have it, and the fact that this can just keep attacking consistently is pretty good. Our deck is not going to block well. But that's kind of the idea, is you don't care. You just keep attacking. Yeah, here's something else we could do with the treasure token. Get a hasty 4/3. I like Find Some Prisoners a lot. A lot of people will talk about any card that draws a card as having cycling, and I think they're incorrect. Because what you want is a card that has a specific effect, and if you don't need that effect, you can cash it in, maybe to look for a land or another card. You Find Some Prisoners actually does that. It destroys an artifact, which can be incredibly relevant in this set. On turn 2, you can just, air quotes, cycle it and find a land from your opponent's deck, generally speaking, or a card that you can play. So I often main deck that. I don't think we're going to need any of this, and I don't think it's time to shift perspectives. I also don't think we're going to play the Spiked Pit Trap, so I'm going to take a Divine Smite. If we bump into an Evolving Wilds and decide we want to splash, all of a sudden we could do that. The Armory Veteran would be acceptable with the Reaper's Talisman. I kind of want my last 2-drop to be another Sepulchral Ghoul. And I kind of want one piece of top end anyway, so I think I'm going to take this Earth Cult Elemental. That can also make you sacrifice stuff. I think this pack was... There's another piece of top end, so that's handy. If we're going to be making this many treasures, I'd like something to do with them. The other thing with the Divine Smite is we could splash it just off of treasures if it's going to be good. I was kind of hoping that the other Price of Loyalty would spin, and it didn't. But I think we can make solid use out of the one that we have. I would also actively like another, but whatever. We loved it. We set it free. It didn't come back to us. It wasn't meant to be. We could play a 3/5. I don't know that... I don't necessarily feel compelled to, but we could. Gives us a little bit more value while we're sacking things. With the Price, the Ogre, and Killian, we could splash something if we wanted to. You don't really want to be using Kalane's treasure token to splash, but you can. I'd probably do that if we wanted to bring in the Smite, like if we're playing a deck that's very heavy black, because that's a great removal spell. This pack is a bit stinky-dinky. The Horde Robber would be okay if we'd drawn the Talisman, but we're not always going to draw the Talisman, which means the Horde Robber's not always going to be okay. Vampire Spawn is hard to argue with. But this is really just a bad pack for us. We can't really splash the fighter class, although, I mean, I'd like to. Like, we could go get the Talisman with it, right? But I don't think that's quite worth it. I'm going to take the Vampire Spawn. There's a decent chance we play that. There's 3 cards in this pack that I want. I think I have to take the Dragon's Fire, because we're kind of on like 2 removal spells, and this would really finish us here. But I really like Swarming Goblins. I also really want 1 copy of Feign Death in this deck, or just some decent combat trick. And this is a pretty decent combat trick. Because most of our stuff should trade with what we're attacking into anyway, but like, if I have to play the Null Camp, we can play the Null Camp. Ooh, wow. I quite like Warlock class and Chaos Channeler. One thing that can be difficult to achieve is card advantage in a red-black deck, and the Chaos Channeler is giving that to you. We have 1 Skullport Merchant, which is also giving that to us. I think we can take advantage of the Warlock class. I was pretty low on this initially, and I got to play with it I don't remember what color combo it was. I think it was blue-black, and it was actively good. Man, I really want that channeler too. Death Priest of Urkel is probably not our droid. I think I could fit this in here and maybe like trim the Beholder and just have this for another piece of top end. Because if I'm going to get some treasure from the Hoarding Ogre and probably some treasure from the Windfall, it's not crazy to think that we could cast this. I also don't hate improvised weaponry, but like it's hard to say no to a 2-for-1. Also, it's the Dungeons and Dragons set, if you didn't know. Like, you take the dragons. The deck's almost done. I think our creature count is fine. We're at like 14 now. Deadly Dispute could sort of get us some more card advantage, but I feel like I'm probably okay with the Windfall and the Skillport Merchant. So I think the card I'm most likely to play out of this is the 5/3. And if this is the deck we're comfortable. The other ghoul might be more useful if I find another active treason effect. Which I'm not entirely sure that I will. They seem to be going pretty highly. I guess it's not a bad thing to have too many 2-drops. So I also don't like need some of these other cards. We could consider the Armory Veteran. I don't have to play Eyes of the Beholder. This thing's not bad either. It would give us something that is threatening to attack with and is a decent block. So I think we can go through here and make a few cuts and decide what we want to do. Like Rust Monster, I don't think is looking great. Yeah, I probably end up not even wanting the combat tricks. Well, there's a Feign Death. That may be too good for me to pass on. Because we've got some pretty spicy targets for Feign Death. There's nothing wrong with main decking this cast, by the way. Like, absolutely nothing. It is a fine magical card. Don't really need the Deadly Dispute. I wish we had one more Active Treason. I thought we were going to get there entirely on Black-Red Sack. It's certainly fine for us to play the first copy. We've got 4 ways to sacrifice the thing that we take. So, like, that's almost always going to be advantage for us. I think I want to stay at 17 lands. And we're a little overloaded on creatures here. So, like, cutting 3 creatures and then 1 spell is probably pretty reasonable. I don't feel compelled to play Eyes of the Beholder, although it's fine. I don't think the Zombie Ogre is quite aggressive enough for what we're trying to do. Usually, and this isn't a 2-drop, that's important to remember. So one of these has to go. It's not going to be the Merchant. It's not going to be the Fangblade. It's probably going to be the Vampire Spawn. Again, there's nothing wrong with this. I just don't quite have room for it. I do feel a bit overloaded on Sepulchre Ghouls, but there's times where you can just like Warlock class somebody out or sacrifice something with Feign Death to get a ETB triggered again. Which is not huge, but we could do it. This deck really would have liked 1 Hoarding Goblin. Because it's either a Sepulchre Ghoul or an Armory Veteran, or I could just cut the You Find Some Prisoners. It's a difficult decision. Let's think about what we're going to be spending our treasures on and how many of them we have. Because it's also possible that the rust monster just doesn't belong anymore, right? Because I'm generally going to want to spend the treasures to ramp or to put counters on my other creatures with Kalain. I don't think I want to put counters on the rust monster or use the threat of activation for it. So it may be that that's the actual thing to go, right? Because we're going to be using treasures to cast these expensive things. And it's not like we're getting a ton of treasure out of this deck. We're getting some, and I can sacrifice the treasures to draw more cards. So really the worst thing I could do with treasures is use them to pump this. Especially, but like, there's this scenario where, let's say your opponent has a bunch of open mana. They have a 2/2, and you attack with your rust monster. They have a 2/3 rather. You attack with your rust monster, you have a treasure open, and they block. Like, do you even attack into the 2/3? Because if they block it and you sack the treasure, they obviously have something. And it's not quite a 2-for-1, but considering I could have used that treasure potentially to put a counter on something else, to draw a card, or just to cast a big thing, I think all of that added together means that the rust monster just really doesn't quite belong here. When we took it late, it was like there's a lot of things you can do with treasure. And when we got it late, that was kind of the first thing we got to do. But now that we've found more, I think I'm significantly less interested in the rust monster. And I think it's worth spending some time thinking about your last card and deciding, is this really the thing that I want to be doing? Is this the best use of my resources? And I think Rusty's just not it. We could also consider the Baleful Beholder over the Earth Cult Elemental. And I think that's probably the right call too. Like, the sacrifice... I've got so many sacrifice effects, and we're not going to get to, like, what's that, 9 mana? But the menace from this can be incredibly relevant. So can the enchantment removal under the right circumstances. If they have a menace containment on something we really need to unlock, or a class card that's doing some work for them. So I think I like starting with this. I'm a little sad not to be able to fit the vampire spawn in here. I think I'd have to cut the armory veteran from it, and I really want to try to come out aggressive adjacent. Yeah, I think this will do. I think this will do. I wouldn't hate you if you wanted to switch some of those cards around. But it's one of the things I figured out when playing Team Sealed. For those of you who don't know, I top 8'd a GP in Team Sealed with my teammates KYT and Josh Frankel. And one of our strategies was you have to build 3 decks, but instead of building all 3 decks, we built 3 decks of 20 cards and then let the person that was going to play the deck pick the last 3. Because there's no freaking point in arguing about whether a 2-mana 2/2 or a combat trick is the best card in a list. Like, just let the person that's going to play it play it. This looks pretty good. We've got turn 2 Kalain into a pumped up creature, and if we need to fish for a land, we can do that too. We've also got the option here of just playing 2 2-drops next turn, which is a pretty freaking good start. Also, it's likely we're going to be able to find some good stuff from their deck. I can use the bluff factor of this to probably sneak in a point of damage on them. There's no way they're blocking that. I want this one to have the counter, I think. Like, they'd kind of have to be a monster to block that. Ideally here they cast one big thing, like a 4-drop. And we can just kind of close this one out. I think I still want to go for it here. And it's likely we'll cycle the prisoners to find some more action next turn. They've gotten bold, which I appreciate. Or they're going to use this to, like, combat trick me, which is, again, super fine by my estimation. we've been gotten. Now, the downside here is if they have like a big 5-drop, we would be sad to see that. But that's kind of what we're going to attempt to do with the prisoners, is either find an answer to it or get some business going. What do we want here? I have to play it this turn, right? I can play it until the end of my next turn. So the land lets me windfall, which would be nice. The swarming goblin solves a lot of my problems and gives me a lot of fodder. Either way, I'm not doing anything this turn. So I think I like the swarming goblins with the idea that we'll play it next turn, because it's until the end of my next turn. I'm just going to hold the land in case we draw a red, because this I'd love to discard this. There's a chance they're able to... okay. I'll just keep him, thank you. Kinda happy to trade him off with the hunter if they attack now. Because they're probably terrified that I have more, oh yeah, they're throwing stuff away. They're scared of more active treason effects. Which is good for me, I don't have any. But this gives me a couple of blockers for the Tiger Tribe Hunter. If we can hit red, we can dig deeper. Anything else we draw, we should be in business. I was a little aggressive with that act of treason earlier. But we've certainly put the fear of the gods into them. And they won't be needing that black dragon. Realistically, no one needs a black dragon. They're terrible pets. I think bathing a cat's a problem. You should try giving a black dragon an acid bath. A little bit of a truth detector there. Like, you can only attack here if you have something, but my hand is not in a position to not block this. I wish it was. Well, hello there. Okay. If they got something, it would not surprise me if they use it to kill this ghoul. Because they have to be bloody terrified of the thing. I may need to just accept this trade. Because they don't actually have another act of treason to draw. What would make it bad, I suppose, is drawing Feign Death. But none of that's going to let me deal with the Valor Singer. I think we just got to let this one go. I should be able to find an answer to a 4/4. I'm going to do this now in case we draw something we want to cast. Ideally, we would be able to cast this, but we'll get there. Not if they keep doing that. Sure, sacrifice an enchantment. I don't have any reason to be holding lands from here. I came to game. Okay. I don't think they know what that does. They really kind of screwed up there. Which is okay. I have screwed up before too. It is a thing that can happen to anyone. It has certainly happened to me. But that was kind of a game-losing error. Because if they didn't attack, I couldn't play the Grim Wanderer. I think they're still in a heap of trouble with me top-decking the Black Dragon. So in the mirror, we begin to become quite interested in the Ghast. Although with Ray of Enfeeblement and only the 1x one, maybe I don't care about the Ghast. On the draw, I might be very interested in the Zombie Ogre. Or a Vampire Spawn of my own. I'm going to have to block a little bit more than I'd like. Yeah, I think I want to trim a Sepulchre Ghoul for a Vampire Spawn. I should still be able to find one sacrifice effect to work with the price of loyalty. I'm ever so slightly interested in the Zombie Ogre over the Baleful Beholder. It comes down a turn earlier and it just blocks better against what they're doing. Because on the draw, I should be behind. They should be the one starting out quickly, and I'm the one that has to like compensate and recover. Which is why I'm kind of interested in the Shambling Geest. Like, you can generally get value out of that thing in a mirror match. It might be better than Warlock class. Might not be. It's hard to say, really. I'm going to give it a go and see how aggressive a start they can pull together. It's not bad for us. Not bad at all. I think if they turn one kill it, Ghislaine, we just turn two kill it. Because we're essentially shrinking their next few creatures, which I think I'm happy about. Well, you say that, and then they play the second one. Somewhat arbitrarily large, and I don't really care for it. But I'm still going to go with this. We can get the Sellsword down next turn and block that. Well, like I said, we're behind. So my intention would be to Sellsword without treasure and see if we can get a block in. Alright, they're out of gas. That should mean I'm safe to play my own Killian and Lightfoot Rogue. I'm not sure how to say this dude or dudette's name, in case you were wondering. Next turn I can attack with the Rogue and or the Jaded Sellsword and potentially flash in a big Grim Wanderer. I'm not certain yet whether I want the treasures for card advantage or beef. Well, that lets me flash this in, which is nice. But it doesn't let me get value off of that. And I could just sack this and get a card. I think I'm going to do that. Because that keeps them from getting the treasure too. And like next turn, we can make something trade and get this in play. I don't think that's going to be a concern. Let's go ahead and grab a little bit extra cartage here. It's unlikely that they'll trade this for the 4/4, but I mean, damage is damage. If they kill anything that's not the merchant, we just draw cards and flash in the Wanderer. So you can really kind of see the Skullport Merchant doing some work here. Now, we've drawn all lands, which sucks, but we were going to draw them anyway. So perhaps it's helping us get through that flood. I got a goblin too. Tasty goblin snacks. We've even got us one of them feign deaths, don't we? Nice. Still flooding out a bit, but that's okay. We can draw the good stuff. They're almost keeping parity with us as far as the flood goes. Okay, I can actually use that when they go to sacrifice my merchant. And replace the card, because I don't have to cast it on my own creatures. Which is interesting. Which I think I'd like to do. They're probably going to eat a goblin, which is fine. Crap. I can't respond to the sacrifice. I had to do it in response to them sacking the goblin. Today I learned. We've learned a new thing, boys and girls. I bet at least half of you watching already knew that. And are now smacking your keyboard. That is unfortunate, because we've managed to turn one of our better draws, Act of Treason, into one of our worst draws. Although, to be fair, I think that means that I was in a bit of trouble there. Because they could have responded to this with the sacrifice. So I don't think the Feigned Death was ever going to do anything. All it's going to do now is make them sacrifice their guy, which, I mean, sucks, but is what it is. It's rather ghoulish. Yeah, that means that there was actually no window for me to do that. Unless I cast it with the Act of Treason on the stack. That's what I should have done. I had to cast it when they targeted it. They can have it, but I'm always going to get it back. Why in the world do you not attack there? I don't really know, but I like it. I think that means we're ready to trade off this Lightfoot rogue now. Because if for some reason they don't want to sacrifice that goblin to get good attacks, I'll cash it in for a venture. Or not. That's acceptable too. I think it's still got a pretty safe attack. I want to apply some pressure or try to get some value before they top deck their Black Dragon and kill me. And this thing's pretty good at applying pressure, especially if you just roll natural 20s like a champ. Welcome to D&D, yo. Because all of a sudden the life totals are looking a bit more even. Like there's the Black Dragon that I suspected they would top deck and use to kill me. We're going to need one hell of a windfall here. It's not quite it. They're still just apparently terrified to block this, but I bet I can trade it for a 1/1 now. Or not. Acceptable. We've got our own active treason to draw. If I wanted to, I could sacrifice this to get a dungeon venture right now. Do any of them really do anything? I don't think so. Like, I do need a killer top deck. Because our other plan is to, like, swing team next turn. Do I have to eat that? I think I do. But there's a lot of my plan. Going up in smoke. We'd have some pretty rotten blocks if they swung team. Not gonna lie. Active Treason or Black Dragon off the top. New. That is not good enough, and we are now dead. We are now incredibly dead. I suppose I should have taken that scry. Or played the Feign Death properly earlier. Now I'm kind of just curious what the next card was, because I don't think I can win from here, right? Like, their blocks... They're going to block in such a way that this doesn't kill them. And I could have played this first, but, like, as long as they block everything, there's no way it's doing anything. They would have to not block... I'd have to roll high on the rogue. They don't block the rogue, the spawn, or the other ghoul. They're going to block stuff. This is just for funsies. Because I want to take the scry and see if there was an active treason under that. Because I kind of think I was supposed to sacrifice the Lightfoot Rogue last turn. Because there's really only 2 cards we can draw that matter. But I'm not going to make them worry. They got it. I just want my scry. I shouldn't look. It's bad form to look. But if we'd scried the ghoul to the bottom, we'd have hit this. And that's fine. They got this one. The more I play, the more I feel like I want one of these shambling guys. We could also consider splashing the Divine Smite. I would do it probably almost entirely off of treasures, but they got a ton of stuff that it hits. And I've got, what, 1, 2... I almost want to put 1 plains in for this, but I think it's going to be pretty good. think it's going to be pretty good. Well, the Warlock class at least cycles through, and I am on the play now. Maybe we let Feign Death go. It's not protecting what I want. I don't think I need the planes, but I kind of still want the planes. It would have to be one of these for planes. That's a little risky, but like just being able to kill the Black Dragon or taking out one of their ghouls at instant speed seems really good. This has a lot of cards we're interested in, but I don't think a one-lander on the play is reasonable, even if it means going to 5. I've won games that I didn't have much business winning. It's going to have to be this and the Ogre. This can help me find the land. I won a game in the Sweatsuit Invitational off of a mold of 4 against Kenji, which was freaking terrifying, but it's what we needed to do, so we did it. They're incredibly likely to trade these anyway, but I need that to happen. That's impressive. That means they have an answer for it. It doesn't make sense to race that. Oh, this is rough, dudes. Maybe they think it makes sense to race this. I think if I flood from here, we have some chance. Okay, there's their answer. Look how much pressure we put on with just 2 cards. We managed to deal 6 points of damage. I really need a land. I might should just fire this off to hit it rather than even going through my own stuff. I suppose it's look at my top 3 or look at their top 3. Which doesn't super matter. Okay, it matters a little bit if it's... Why are you going to be like that? Oh, Carp. Okay. I guess that's the argument, is my deck hates me. And doesn't want to give me the lands that I need to function. What's it like? We have to hit the land this turn, which means we're going to find some prisoners on their side and hit a, we have to hit a mountain. We frankly have to hit a mountain. Gods. That's functionally game. Because I can't envision anything that gets us out of this, especially with them having a grip full of cards. Oh, that was unfortunate. That was really unfortunate. But here we are. You live, you learn. Sometimes games are decided based on who draw the right number of lands and spells. It is unfortunate when that happens, but maybe if I had used that Feign Death properly, I had not seen that interaction yet. And I should have known back from my days that you can't respond to a sacrifice effect. I can't stop them from sacrificing a creature. I was pausing there and thinking through it because I could tell I was missing something. I still don't think I was going to win that second round anyway. And there's really no reason to beat yourself up for losing to mana screw. Like, sometimes you're just mana deprived. And there's not really much you can do about it. Except try to fight your way through. You're pretty disadvantaged if you have to mulligan even once. And mulliganing twice is almost catastrophic. But like I said, I've done it in high-stakes environments. I think I'd rather try to blog that than set up to Price of Loyalty immediately. Like, there's a possibility they play a 2-1. There's a possibility they don't. This is a bit too threatening for me to just leave there. I can't block that if they play land and attack first, so I need to attack with it. Like, if they want to double pump it and attack, by all means go for it. Because I think if that's their turn, we're pretty happy with it. This likely means that they have a removal spell. And that they didn't want to use on the Armory Veteran, but until they play another creature, Targnar's not really that threatening. And I'm afraid there is a price for your loyalty. There we go. That's what our deck is supposed to do. Look at him, dead to a beholder. That's how it was supposed to play out. So against green, green-red. And we drew that like a champ. I don't think I actually changed much against green-red. The 3/5 is an incredible blocker against a lot of what they're doing, but their plan seems to be pack tactics. Nonsense. We're pretty well built to handle that, at least as well built as we can be. Like a little bit of spot removal. The talisman should be very good against them too. That's kind of why I wish we had one of the swarming goblins. Like, just some way to make multiple tokens to put the talisman on and continue pressure. But, c'est la vie, we do not have this. This will work, although it's worth noting we're not going to be able to get black off of the Find Some Prisoners. Which is kind of unfortunate, but we can use it to hit a land drop and get to windfall mana. That's somewhat promising as a magic missile target. I may hold off on the prisoners if they play something else I could hit with it. But as it stands, I'd probably rather just kill the 3/3. Which means if we're going to hit a land with this, I think we can go ahead and do it. Yeah, I think I'd rather just hit a land drop for next turn. And get this out of the way. Well, that needs to die too, but I can't really make that happen currently. So do we windfall and let them have the cards? The good news is they can't really cast much that they get off of it. They'd have to be hitting lands. Because if I suppose I could Killian into the Lightfoot Rogue and just block it. That's unexciting, but probably the right call. Probably the best hit for them, I'd presume. I wonder why you wouldn't do that first. I suppose I don't need to know. I probably didn't need to use both treasures on that if our intention is to block, and I think that it is. Well, it means I would have had to use the treasure to protect it anyway, which I'm doing. So I guess I did need to use both treasures on it. That is actually quite a lot of pack tactics going on there. That's going to make our Reaper's Talisman a little worse. Because I can only block one thing. So we're in a wee spot of trouble here because I'm not racing that. I have to block crap. I probably have to block the Knoll Hunter, which I don't want to block. I'm doing this for the life gain. I don't anticipate that they'll block it. We could block the Knoll Hunter, sacrifice Killian. Like trading a 1/2 for a 3/3 is pretty good. No, we still couldn't make that trade. Like the downside here is if I top deck my own act of treason, I'm actually in a lot of trouble. Because I need to kill all of these cards. So I kind of have to still trade it for the Knoll Hunter. But Targnar is also incredibly threatening. I suppose if I take out the Targnar, they're not likely to have pack tactics. But we've got some very dead draws. I've seen a lot of people playing this in basically all the different colors. I don't really like the halfling in decks that aren't green-white. I don't think the treasure is that valuable. Now, we lost to it, so there's some argument there, but... I think I still have the tools that I need. I need to be able to come out a little more aggressive against them. Like, that felt like a case of us not having enough lands and then flooding out promptly. I liked game one a lot better, personally. Let's just have another hand like that. This one ain't great, but it wouldn't mind drawing a few lands. And it's hard for me to argue with a hand like that. We've got an Armory Veteran, a removal spell for a Targnar. That feels a bit better than mulling to infinity. There are some one-landers I'll keep on the draw. There's not many I'll keep on the play. Just like we drew it up. Except for the swamp, but there's a swamp right on top. I'm not nervous. You don't need to be nervous either. Everything's going to be okay. See? We did at least hit a land drop. That's good news. Okay, that's pretty bad news.
Reinforcements will drive them back.
That's pretty bad news. Because we're gonna have a hard time interacting with that. Like, I have to attack it. We need the mana. We really needed 2 bloody treasure tokens. That is freaking terrifying. Yuck. Because what I wanted to do was play down Zalto and have up Feign Death, but I can't do that now. And I still have to play him. This is incredibly awkward. Because all they have to do is kill this and my game's over. We do get a scry at least, which is nice. Oh lord, I can't take that. I have to bottom it and hope for a swamp. I'm too far behind to afford a tap land right now. That's horrible. The literal worst. This is not going to get any better. Yeah, I think this is game over, man. Man, it's hilarious. When I sit down to do these drafts for face-to-face, I get wrenched. It's almost turning into a meme at this point. I promise you guys and gals I win some drafts. And that the principles that you're seeing in play here can work for you and lead to draft wins for you. They just can't when I'm recording for Fossa Foss. Which is, I mean, low-key fantastic. But I think this illustrates how much randomness there is in a game of Magic. And you could look at something like that and determine that either this deck was bad. Like, let's say you just looked at the results. All you heard was that I drafted this and I went 0-2. You might start to make some assumptions about that. Like, you can't play a black-red sacrifice deck with only 1 price of loyalty, or Warlock class is bad, or Reaper's Talisman was bad. And we saw evidence that both of those cards were relatively bad, right? Like, I drew the Reaper's Talisman when we didn't have a board. But to be fair, most equipment is not good when you don't have a board. You could even look at that sort of environment and say Evolving Wilds is bad because it wasn't the swamp we needed. But again, to be fair, even if we'd drawn a swamp instead of the Evolving Wilds, we were still incredibly dead. So there's a lot of assumptions you could make, but it really just came down to, like, I think I made one mistake with not properly sequencing the Feign Death. I don't know that it would have mattered given the draws that came after. After that, it was a matter of who drew the right mix of lands and spells. And there's some things you can do to have some control over that, such as play cards like you find some prisoners. But a lot of it's just random. And you kind of have to take those punches and roll with them, I suppose is the best way to say it. Either way, I appreciate you guys and gals watching. I'll be back with another draft for you next week. And if you'd like to see some drafting live, you can stop on over to the Twitch stream. I stream generally Monday through Fridays at twitch.tv/Semulin. All right, y'all have an excellent day, and I'll see you next week.